Uncomfortable with this, there's no music.
Yes, there was music, Renee, and now we are live. And videos showing, so Zach, keep it in your pants.
What's up, guys?
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Retro Roundtable. How's everyone doing tonight?
Another horrific episode
Yeah.
of RetroRGB.
Welcome back to another episode of When is Nick Gonna Shave His Goddamn Beard Already?
I thought we already determined that's never.
Yeah. We'll see. For everyone that's in the chat, we are probably not going to be monitoring it for the first half, I would say. We decided to kind of try to talk amongst ourselves at the beginning here, and then we may, after we get through kind of our round table of things, then we'll take a look at the chat. But I do... Okay, some people are saying the volume is low, so I will crank that up a little bit.
It's your beard. That's the problem.
Yeah, it's my beard's muffling everything.
Muffling all the sound.
Is just Nick's audio low, or is all of our audio low?
Well, I'm monitoring the level, so I'm making sure it's all kind of matched. So we should be good now, I think.
Now everyone's clipping? Okay, good.
Yeah. So for anyone who is new to this shit show, we've got the five of us here. We'll go around and kind of we do like a round table thing at the beginning where we talk about maybe something we've worked on or something cool we did or saw or whatever. And then we got some longer form topics at the end, and we'll take questions that have been submitted last time and anything that we see in the chat that's interesting. So, with that being said, let's kick it off. Who wants to start?
Renee said he wanted to start.
All right, Renee, you start.
Okay. Well, I worked on a few things since last time we spoke to our beloved YouTubers. I guess I'll start with this. So, I finally pulled out the Master System cartridge adapter on my my cart reader and writer. And I've been testing various ways to read the data off of a Master System cart. It's a bit tricky because there's the mapper in there. Things are going well, right? The code's on GitHub and whatnot, so there's nothing really spectacular to report other than I can read data off a Master System cart. And hundreds of people have done that in the past. But eventually, I'll get to writing to my own Master System carts too, which shouldn't be that far out in the future. And I guess the cool thing about that is that's the last system I want to have done before I actually start releasing some of these cartridge reader and writers out into the wild, so that other people can develop on them and improve the code and use them to release their homebrews or whatever the hell it is they want to do with them. So,
and for those people who might not be familiar with this whole project, what's the game plan here? The software is free, the hardware you sell. Like, what's your plan?
Okay, so
what's your scheme?
Yeah, how are you gonna fleece the retro community out of their hard-earned dollars?
Okay, so I dropped Mace. I broke Mace Hunter 3D. Shit. Okay, so every cartridge writer that comes has just like a generic port on it, and I'm going to sell this without the Teensy, because you can buy that off of pgrc.com. Those are the software is open source, the hardware is closed sourced. Kind of the same concept I'm going with too. So you can buy the adapters from me, and you can buy the different cartridge adapters that you need. And if your plan is only to back up your games or to back up your save files or whatever, then that's all you need. But if you're a home brewer and you're going to want to sell some games, I'm also going to sell blank cartridges for various systems. So then you'll just plug them into there, and you can write your own ROM to it.
3D printed cartridges?
I do provide the files for the enclosures for Master System and for Genesis on my site. I'm not going to actually print those and sell them because it takes, hours and hours to print just a half of a shell. But people can take those files and they can get quotes for molds or whatever the hell they want to do with it, right? Those are absolutely free without any restrictions. So.
Sweet. How are you, Bob? We move on to you.
Oh, but I wasn't done.
Oh,
I
sorry.
wasn't done. Damn you.
You left a big pause there. I thought you were done. Keep going.
Well, he said two things. He was
Okay,
like,
Yeah.
my bad.
Yeah. The other thing is I got this sweet deal on an Altera, a Terrasic, how do you say that? Terrasic? A DE2 dev board. It's actually bigger than my face. This is what I was bragging about earlier. I got it for like 70% off. These on the website, they go for like $485, I think, US. And I got it for $150 Canadian, which is like, $2 US if you convert, right? So I'm really happy to finally get a good FPGA dev board. So I'm gonna start doing some really nice projects with that. One of the projects I'm looking at involves the EXT port on the PC Engine, and I think that's gonna be spectacular. So.
Awesome.
That's it. Now I'm done.
Well, am I up?
Yeah, go for it.
Zach looks so confused right now.
Yeah, I don't know what he's doing. He's on another podcast right now.
Right, he's on Adam Kralick's podcast right now. I have been working very hard on RetroRGB 2.0, and I think I'm going to launch that September 1st. And it's a completely different. It's going about the website a completely different way. So it's basically going to be an open Wikipedia, and anybody can sign up for an account and add information. And then, of course, the information doesn't go live until it's approved by a moderator, so that way we don't get spammed by a million things. And then I believe I'm doing some more research, but I'm going to try to start a Kickstarter to actually make it a not-for-profit website, like a Wikipedia. So essentially donate the website to the retro gaming community. And I'd still do the podcast, and I'd still administer the site as much as I could, and still dump a very insane amount of hours into it. But yeah, I want to make sure that this information lives on past me. I don't plan on offing myself or anything, but I'm just just saying that I want this information to stay out there. But I also want something that lasts forever. Forums go down all the time. Sites like Instructables are great, but that's going to go away eventually. And then things like Reddit and Facebook, I really appreciate the efforts that people have put into those Facebook groups and the Reddit threads, but that's all going to go the way of MySpace probably within 10 years. So this is going to outlive all of them, and if I can get the funding to set it up as a not-for-profit company, I could also set it up to pay for itself. So no more like one time only. Like it won't be like Wikipedia where every other month you're getting half of the Wikipedia page saying please donate money. Like you'll never have to deal with that.
But Bob, I was really looking forward to like a banner of just your eyeballs staring like deep into my soul and judging me for not donating a cup of coffee to your website.
Yeah, those are kind of annoying. But they'll also have a forum set up, and the forums will be linked directly into all of the pages. So that way, all of these things, because it really annoys me that so much information gets lost on a forum. You'll have a 100-page topic with phenomenal info in it that never goes anywhere. So now as these topics are being discussed, if, once everything's decided upon and you have an idea and everybody proves that it works, rather than just linking to one post in a thread, now you could just immediately take that and update the Wikipedia, and everybody will be able to share in the info. It's going to take forever to move everything over. That's what I'm hoping the Kickstarter will be able to pay, at least for somebody to move it. But I'll eventually take all the watermarks off all of my pictures. I want to donate the whole thing to everybody so that we can all kind of just work on this together. And I'm hoping that a lot of the bigger names that have great websites that they don't really update anymore would consider dumping their data into this. And if the funding gets up enough, I don't even care if you call it RetroRGB anymore. I could take that name and just make it a blog post somewhere, and it's really, to me, the only thing that matters is that I get this set up for the community, and it's going to happen either way. The Kickstarter could generate $1. It doesn't matter. It's just if I pay out of my own dime, it might take a full year to get everything moved over. But a successful Kickstarter guarantees by the end of this year 100% up and running. So that's why I've been working like morning to night, like from the time I wake up to the time I pass out every freaking day on this. That's why I've fallen behind on some of the videos too, is because as much as I really enjoy doing the videos and stuff, like this is, in my opinion, important because all of this great info we always share now has its own place. No more scattered across the web. And if we can get it like an actual not-for-profit, that is literally on paper a way of saying it's owned by the people and not, I'm just an admin at that point. So I'm a little nervous that people are going to be like, what the fuck, you're asking me for money? But I'm always nervous about that, so whatever. Other than that, I know the website's going to be good. It's already done in the fact that it's working. All the permission things are set. The only things that are left to do besides transfer the info over are, I want to do it so that people can log in with their social media accounts. Because generally speaking, people over 30 just log in, create an account, and that's it. But the millennials just can't understand why you wouldn't just be able to log in with Twitter or Facebook. So I want to be able to make sure it works for everybody.
Cool.
But Bob, giving it to the community, isn't that communist? Are you a commie?
I mean, technically, you'd be a commie too if you open source the software on your Teensy Darkness number. Does that make you a teensy commie from Canada?
It does, yeah.
But yeah, you guys have any thoughts on that? Anybody? You might as well start flinging shit at me now because it's going to happen soon enough.
Bob, I think it's a great idea.
I think it needs to be done as soon as possible because you already burned through one of your livers, and I don't know how long the other one's going to last.
I switched to wine.
On a practical note, I think like the only thing that's still like kind of going to be worth figuring out is like people know you as RetroRGB, right? Like,
yeah,
you and RetroRGB are one and the same at this point, and figuring out whether the community version is still called RetroRGB versus something else, and you retain that. That's worth taking a minute to figure out. I don't know if you've decided on anything yet.
Well, I decided, this is going to be a shitty answer, I decided that I really don't care, that the community part of it's way more important to me, but I have an inkling that if I call this new site RetroRGB, a lot of people might get the wrong idea. They might think, like, well, I'm just giving you my info. So I would actually really prefer to make, obviously forward all the links to the new stuff. It's another thing I'd have to work on. But, make RetroRGB just a placeholder, a blog that points to either the YouTube videos or the pages on the wiki, and call it like consolewiki.com. ConsoleWiki's already taken, so maybe those guys would like to donate their name to the Kickstarter. But
ConsoleWiki 2.
Yeah, right.
There's nothing classier than throwing a number on there.
Yeah, so I do think it would be better for everybody if we called it something more generic, but it's not just consoles. I want information on RGB monitors, service manuals, how to mod them, how to repair them, capacitor lists, things that, like, this info is going to get lost soon. And I want these things to, if 10 years from now somebody gets a BVM that's in mint condition but needs a cap replacement, like, how do they do it? How do they discharge the tube? How do they do it without dying? Like, I want good, solid info that just lasts forever. So,
right on. Cool.
Sorry, I'm still giggling about the two, because sequels make so much more money at the box office.
Yeah.
RetroRGB 2 Judgment Day.
Yeah.
We'll call it Console Wiki 3 because we'll just skip right past 2 and go straight to 3 because 3 makes so much more money.
That's what they were going to do with Spaceballs. They were going to call it Spaceballs 3, the search for 2.
I might be the only one getting the Stolen Identity 3 reference, Steve.
That's okay. It's worth it.
Yeah. All right, Zachary, you're unusually quiet for the biggest mouth on the cast.
Is my audio working?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to say hello, everybody. It's good to see you all. We get together so rarely. As for things that I've been doing as of recently, I am in my 8th day of treatment for HIV and gonorrhea.
I gave it to him.
Unfortunately, it wasn't you this time. As most of you know, Sting came down a couple of weekends ago. And we had a great time. We had a gay time. And that's been happening. But other than that, I've been working on a couple of things. Some small projects that are kind of filling the time in between doing mod work and big projects. But one of the big projects, of course, is you know, you may recognize that as a Neo Geo cart for an AES. Better video output for the AES, all AES revisions, and also MVS arcade hardware too. That's now no longer on the horizon. That's happening.
Wheels are in motion.
Wheels are in motion. Things are going. You know, some interesting discoveries are being found. You know, like you can survive with one testicle. But other than that, AES stuff is full speed ahead. The Commodore stuff is still happening as far as the debug cartridge and the hardware to debug dead Commodore 64s and Commodore C128s. That's still very much active. But that stuff, as active as I am on that, that's really become secondary to a much bigger problem that I've had. And that's mass production of the N64 RGB, of the SNES RGB, and of the PC Engine Duo boards. I am in I was in a bit of a hailstorm with Chinese intelligence, working with them very close. Shut the fuck, don't you laugh. Don't you dare laugh at me. I was working with the Chinese intelligence and their agencies. Had some quality issues. I've had some quality issues with a couple of different vendors, and I found a new vendor that I've been speaking to for a couple of weeks that I feel really good about. They're a very clear line of sight and communication, but I am 10 days out. Hopefully, in 10 days, I will have much larger quantities of N64 RGB, sRGB, and the Duo, the PC Engine RGB circuits, the boards. So 10 days out from that, worked really hard on that. I'm trying to meet the demand that's out there that people keep asking me, when you have in stock, when you have in stock, guys. I just want to tell you, I want you to have this as much as you want to have it. I'm not trying to be an asshole, but I'm one man, and I'm trying to make sure that everybody gets exactly what they need in life. So just bear with me. Give me a couple more weeks tops, and I'm doing everything that I can to satisfy your lady parts or male parts.
About fucking time.
And
in all seriousness, no, you've been going through and making sure that, you know, making minor little changes so that each version of these board is perfect. So I really commend you for that, because I've tried a bunch of them. So I could absolutely vouch that you had a board that was perfect, but you just figured out little different ways to make the manufacturing go better, to make the wire management just a hair better. So you didn't pull the trigger on the big order until you felt like they were as close to perfect as you can get. So that is, you know, as much as I love to tease you about this shit, you did it right. And I understand everybody's frustration, mine as well. But like now, when you do the bulk order, you just 100% confidence that this is going to be a good board, and you don't have to worry about a revision change. So
that's right. That's right. You got it.
Must be nice to have a lot of time to figure that stuff out.
Yes, Steve. You know, unlike what you told me the other weekend. You know, we have time for everything. You know, that's some more innuendo. I think it went over everybody's heads.
I think even if we didn't speak, there would be innuendo. So
fair enough.
But that's all I have for you. AES stuff and mass production. 10 days. Hopefully, I'll have those in, and people will be quite happy about that. I hope. Working hard for everyone.
Do you have and I know this is hard at this point in the process, but do you have like a basic idea of when you might be able to demo on camera, not for sale, but at least demo one of the AES finished designs? Are we talking 3 months? Are we talking a month?
Oh, no. I would say I'm projecting, and this is based on real quantified data. This isn't just pulling it out of my ass. But I project by mid-September, maybe 6 weeks. Hopefully in 6 weeks, I will have something to show that will be meaningful, that will be made into a real market product for people.
For you, Voultar, when are you going to stop being racist towards everyone else in the world and ship to other countries?
Oh, good question.
You know, international stuff has been really tough for me. I've been speaking a lot to a lot of people about the sort of hurdles and and migraines of being an international vendor. I was seeing I talked about that, and he's expressed to me some of the frustrations and some difficulties and just hair-pulling situations that you might get into.
Your mic is a little low. Pop it up there. There you go.
There you go.
Is this good?
Yeah.
That's better. I hear a rumor you might have Canadian distribution.
Well, that's what I was getting to, Bob. Before you rudely interrupted my loins.
You dropped your mic. No one could hear you.
You know, the international stuff, people, you know, they've been hard on me on that, and I understand that. One guy, I can't spend all day working with custom stuff to get out 3 or 4 orders here, but I have been working. I've got a guy. I've got somebody over there in the Switzerland area that I hope to work with, and I have somebody in the Canada land that is a place that's going to be working with me, hopefully, that will be distributors of my product. So Canadians will be taken care of, and anyone in Europe, I guess for the most part, there will be a solution there. And if there's anybody else out there who might be interested in being a sort of an international distributor, contact me.
I think you mentioned there's somebody in Outer Heaven who wanted to get some stock.
Well, you know, yeah, that's we don't talk about that live. So.
I'll hook you up with a South American guy too, because I got a lot of buddies out there that have been asking for your boards. So
South America?
Is that like
guy you get us hooked up with? Sorry, Seinfeld reference.
Is it the guy from Zanzibar?
No, but if you already have one, go for it. So
No. I was talking to this guy from Zanzibar land. But if you've got somebody down there, yeah, have him contact me, please.
Yeah, one of our biggest international destinations, actually Brazil. They go crazy for the video game stuff, and actually really tough for them because their customs is murderous. I mean, it's like I think
it's
100% on our cables sometimes. So it's
yeah, and Brazil's hard because of the local manufacturing. That's almost something that you'd want to work with somebody you trust. You know, you trust implicitly down there, and just send them the designs, have them make them in Brazil, and then just send you a cut. Because trying to ship a bunch of boards to resell, you're gonna get killed on the customs. So
well, your customers are gonna get killed, but
yeah,
they'll pay it maybe.
I just wanted to say one more thing. I said 9-10 days, lead in time for the mass production shit to get here. That's true, but it's not going to be a couple of weeks until I have stock again. I try to make this aware on Facebook, but every week or so, I'm putting stock up. It goes really fast. So if you just monitor my Twitter, not my Facebook, but my Twitter for updates, and there will be stock inventory available in the interim by trying to get that stuff getting here. So just stay alert.
Sweet. Steve, you want to go or should I go? What do you want to do?
I could go.
All right.
So I guess I was talking about spice. Am I talking about spice?
Yeah.
I like spices. I like
oregano.
peppers.
So I got some paprika here. Some, what is this? Oregano. What the hell? And my favorite is the ground coriander. I don't have any black mustard seeds, but I love talking about black mustard seeds. Is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
All right.
Are you actually going to talk?
Oh, wait. There is one more here. There's this, which is I guess what you really wanted me to talk about. So this is SPICE, which stands for Simulation Program with Integrated Circuit Emphasis. It's basically circuit simulation software for analog circuits, and it's just something I wanted to talk about briefly because it's the most useful tool in my arsenal. I don't think enough people use it, and I've done a couple classes at the local hackerspace, trying to teach us
some of this stuff, but there's like this bump that people can't get over, where they just can't do the simulation. They don't think it's real. They don't connect with it. And I mean, everything I've done, 90% has been done in circuit simulation. So, like, for example, the cable stuff, the component cables, a lot of it is measurements. Like, we wrote the color bar software, and we took the measurements from like all these consoles, and we created like a model of what the console outputs look like, and I'm able to put them in the simulation program, and then I have the circuit, and I'm generating my desired output, and I'm able to tweak all this stuff in really quickly, right? I want this resistor that's 1K, I want it 1.2K. Right click, 1.2K, bam. I don't have to order it from DigiKey, wait for it to come, stuff like that. I just right click, change it, hit run, and I get the output. And the first prototype PCB I did all this stuff, then I made the PCB based on the design I had in Spice, and I get it, and I hook it up, and the output on the scope is exactly what I was predicting on the simulation. So I don't know, I think more people need to look into this. Linear Technologies, which is a big IC manufacturing company, they made a really awesome version of Spice called LT Spice. Linear Technology Spice. It's free, completely free to use. They of course have all their built-in models because they want you to simulate their parts and use all their stuff. But you can import whatever you want into there, and that's actually why I kind of have this book. The guy who wrote LT Spice, Mike Engelhart, he was on the Amp Hour podcast, and he was talking about like just all about Spice, and he mentioned this book, and this doesn't really like help you use LT Spice really. This actually describes like everything running under the hood. It's a lot of really mathy stuff, and when I first heard about it, I bought it, and then I didn't really, I turned to the page, and I just like one whole page full of equations, right? And it was kind of intimidating at first, but then I had this project at work where I had to kind of analyze how long we use supercapacitors in aerospace because there's momentary power dropouts. We have supercapacitors that hold up your product, the power to your product. If there's like a small dip in power, it's gone. So I have to hold it up for, let's say, 300 milliseconds. And I had to prove that our design of the amount of supercaps we used would hold up for this amount of time, and it'll be good enough. And so I can actually use this to model like diodes and stuff to do that. But basically, I mean, if you get really into this stuff, you can do a lot of crazy things. I've made models for video chips that I use. I made my own models so I can simulate the circuits. Last night I actually made a model for the Spartan 3 output because I'm using an FPGA dev board, and I made a model of the logic output because I want to drive a DAC, and that's just something I'm able to do in Spice and predict and design up front. And then I know when I order the board, just a quick verification on the scope, and most likely it's going to be acting exactly the same. I mean, I use this stuff all the time. Every time Bob was asking me, like, what capacitors do I need in this type of cable and stuff, and I'm simulating all the corner cases simultaneously. Able to do so much with it. I just kind of wish there was a good video series on teaching people how to use this type of stuff. If nothing shows up in maybe 2 or 3 years, it might be something I might consider doing. Because I spent so much time. I know a lot of little neat tricks and things like that. I went to like a class at the local Linear Tech, hosted some like workshop, and I was actually teaching the instructor guy some tricks that I found out on my own. So
if people want to see kind of maybe a more advanced use case of what you can do with Spice, there's actually a post on our Kickstarter from back in the day where we did some circuit simulations. The post is called, I think, something like Taking the Test Fixtures to Monte Carlo Night or the Casino or something like that, where we basically use Spice to simulate a bunch of, like, add essentially a randomness to our simulation. Because let's say you have a resistor in your circuit and you don't know, it's got a 5% tolerance. You don't know if it's plus 5% or minus 5%. Well, you take that and you do that across like 100 components in your circuit. Your range of outputs, that's a very hard thing to understand. And we wrote something to kind of basically run a 1,000 or so simulations, something like that, I don't remember, where you kind of randomize each part in your circuit each time and produce an output. And that way, the whole point of that thing was, we're designing this test fixture to pass or fail our own circuit boards, and we need to know what we need to allow through, like what normal operation could be. So it's a kind of an interesting post to read if you're curious as to some more interesting stuff you can do.
yeah,
When
there's
this goes offline, can you post a link to that Kickstarter post as well as the free software?
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Put it right in the description in the YouTube.
Yeah.
So and I'll add, he who controls the spice controls the universe.
Oh, I wish I had my fucking Dune shirt on. Oh.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, every time something comes up, I'm launching Spice. I know all the hotkeys, and so like I whip up something really quick. I think Voultar has seen me do it live for him.
Maybe you'll do a demo someday on our own stream or something. We'll see.
Yeah, do it live. Fuck it. Do it live.
Yeah, we'll do it live.
Don't write it. We'll do it live.
Actually, that's something if you ever wanted to do like a Twitch or YouTube Live or both, and you just wanted to run through like a half-hour, 45-minute thing and just let people know in advance, anybody that wanted to log in and ask questions and kind of just watch, or maybe even install the software and like work along with you or something. I think that would be killer. I think a lot of people that even are a bit more than amateur board makers, intermediate, that don't really understand that would benefit big time from something like that.
That's important because another point I just want to make really quickly is I used to really suck at analog electronics, transistor biasing, all that stuff. I learned it all through Spice. I was building all this stuff and looking at the currents and voltages and understanding everything. What happens if I do this? What happens if I do that? What if this is like this? And I'm changing everything all at once, and changing everything around, looking at it, and that's how I learned this stuff. I didn't really learn it that well in school. I learned it through messing around in Spice.
Awesome.
Yeah, we've actually done I don't know, a year ago now or something, when I was doing like ROM hacking tutorials. We just like live streamed it and then saved the video. So maybe we can do something kind of similar at some point. I think that seemed to be received well too, so I think it's worth doing for people. All right, I guess I'll go to wrap up the round table.
Excuse me. Sorry.
You guys aren't going to be able to see my webcam. That's okay. So, on a lighter note, I went to BitGen GamerFest like a week and a half ago, and they had this cool menu, which you guys can see later, which I took from the bar, which has a bunch of video game themed alcoholic drinks. Maybe I'll take a picture of this and post it online if you guys want to make your own drinks. I thought the most interesting tasting, or I guess sounding one, because I didn't taste all of them, was the where is this? It's called the the Creeper, which is lemon vodka, apple schnapps, and energy drink. Sounds like something Steve would like if he was an alcohol drinker. So yeah, that was fun. As far as like technical stuff that I've been doing, I've been doing some analysis of sync signals. Probably people saw me post on this like a month and a half or 2 months ago before we went into selling cables, and then our lives got ruined for a month. But now I'm getting back into that. I started looking into doing some more analysis on N64 and TurboGrafx-16 just before this podcast, actually. And I actually can show that, too. It's kind of interesting. I don't know how well you can see this screen. What I'm showing right now is just kind of a sync, like a raw, noisy sync signal coming off an N64. And what I did was I wrote some software to make that signal nice and pretty and clean and able to be automatically measured. So what we can do is Steve can hook up a console to an oscilloscope, run the record function, send me a text file that's like, I mean, these data files are gigantic, so they're not something that you could realistically measure by hand. But I have a program that will just cut that down and take measurements for you and spit out things like the H-sync and V-sync periods. And that's important for us for a variety of reasons. Many people know, like, SNES does not work on a lot of TVs that other retro consoles work on. And we're currently developing a Dreamcast. So one of the things I know Steve wanted me to mention, that using this technique, we've discovered that the development software for Dreamcast, which is called Chaos, uses a different style sync than you would get out of a standard Dreamcast game, which is concerning, right? Like, we have to go in there and kind of write a custom sync waveform in order for our tests to be valid.
So did all the developers that had to make games for Dreamcast deal with that same crap?
Well, I mean, the developers for Dreamcast weren't using Chaos, right?
Right, yeah. All right, never mind. Sorry.
They were using whatever Sega's libraries.
Yeah, but we don't have the official SDK, and so we need to try to mimic that if we can, for things like our color bar tests and all that to be valid. So that's something I'm working on and refining the process, because you think you got this down, you test it on like 6 consoles and it's working, and then you throw that 7th console in, there's something funky about the signal that just breaks your code. It's happened with every one so far. So it's always kind of making refinements to that and making it easy. At this point, I've probably analyzed like 200 different files that Steve has sent me, which, like I said, you do this by hand and try to measure like H-sync period, it would be impossible.
It's half 1,000,000 points per file.
Yeah. So, huge amount of data, but super valuable.
And dare I ask how far along you guys are with the Dreamcast cable?
Nowhere farther than like 2 months ago when we started selling stuff or whatever.
Yeah. Gotcha.
But in case anyone doesn't know, we did sell out of cables this week, so that'll hopefully mean we have some time coming up where we can get back into development.
God damn it.
So yeah, that's what I got. So what I do next? Looking at our spreadsheet here, we can go into one of these group topics, or what are people feeling?
Questions from last week? No, that's after the group topic. Never mind.
Yeah. Let's open it up after. I would love to do the first thing that we have listed is the RGB versus component 444 color versus 44422. Yeah, that's something I've done so much research on in the past year, and I still feel like I know nothing. I know nothing, Jon Snow.
Okay. So I have some notes here. Again, this is kind of rough because you can't see my screen. But I mean, to start from, what this ends up being is like, if you can understand tilting your head, then you can understand the difference between RGB and component. Little more complicated than that, but that's like all you really need to understand at the simplest level. So I drew here kind of a simple y-x axis graph, and all I did was I put a point at the 0.20. Okay, and so one of the things that you want to understand about some things you can do, what we call linear transformations, is I could go and take my pen here, cross this out, and relabel those points. Instead of 20, I can now change that to be a 0.40. And what I can always do is, if I know how I did that, I can always undo it, right? That's because linear transformations like this are totally invertible. I know that I basically multiplied all the points on my x-axis by 2. And another thing you can do, I have another point at the bottom there, sitting at 2, 1. Well, instead of changing the values on that axis, I can just rotate the entire axis. And now that point might be at a point 2, 0, because I rotated it by an angle. So that's kind of like a high general view of some things you can do with linear transformations. I know I rotated my axis by, let's say, 30 degrees. All I have to do is unrotate the axis by 30 degrees, and I can get back my original points. The points have not moved anywhere. I've not manipulated the data at all. All I've done is change my frame of reference. And that's all you're doing going between RGB and component. And so the last graph I want to show as to why we do this is, if you understand that red, green, and blue values at a pixel are very correlated, which means that if I know the red value of something, the green value is very likely predictable. It's close. Obviously, that's not always true, but in a large sense, if you were to take millions of points from a natural image, these things are correlated. And so if I was to just plot like red and green on an axis, it might look like this, where they all kind of fall along a line with little bits of deviation. And something I might want to do is rotate my axis so that the main axis points along that line that they fall. And that is really the essence of what your Y signal is. It's a magnitude of how far along the line of most variation in a normal image that points fall. And then your different signals are really just kind of, distances from this Y graph. And that's essentially all that YPbPr is compared to RGB. The numbers aren't exactly as I described them here. It's a little more complicated, but this is the basic idea. And you're doing something that you know how you formed that transformation, and that means you can just change your frame of reference back and you have the same numbers as before.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So the transition or the transition between RGB color space and YPbPr is strictly linear. A lot of people ask this question, and I think you have done some research on this. Can you, in some sense, explain to people why the FrameMeister, for example, objectively does such a shitty job with component video in comparison to its RGB output.
I just wanted to say real quickly, everything Nick outlined is the theory, right? And then in practice, other things rear their head. Just as with not all consoles output the same RGB levels. That there's some other. That's just an example of where you can go wrong with RGB. You can have something not generated perfectly. It's out of theory, right? Mm-hmm. White should be red, green, and blue exactly. But let's say your console outputs a little tiny bit more red than it does blue. There's an error. That's just a impractical or something. In theory, it works out, but in practice, there's some little caveats, right? And so I think what you were describing with FrameMeister and Component is there's a lot of caveats with Component that are kind of immune in RGB, because in RGB, if you go directly from an RGB source to RGB display and you make no transformation, each transformation you make has a chance for it to be done incorrectly, right? If you're going back and forth like 4 or 5 times, right? Each of those has a possibility of something being done incorrectly, versus if you're going from point to point, and that's a big if you're going from point to point. We could probably talk about that later.
Yep.
Where you avoid all the practical pitfalls that can occur.
Right, so can we pause here for a second? Because I definitely want to talk about what Zach said, but to your point, Steve. So when you and I and Nick talked a while back, we made an example that, like a cheap analogy, if you will, that says, translating between YPbPr and RGB is just like translating languages. So if I say something like, Bob is a fat drunk in English, Renee, how would you say that in French?
Bob is a fat drunk purple monkey dishwasher.
It would be Bob est un gros saoulon.
Right. So let's say Renee.
Beautiful, Renee.
Let's say Renee can't actually speak French. The translation's wrong, and then people think Bob is pretty. So everything's different. So what I like that analogy because anybody can understand that. But the thing that I never really understood and grasped, and this leads into the FrameMeister thing, is so what you said. First of all, things in theory will work, but in practical. What if Renee's headset was broken and he didn't hear what I said, so he translated wrong? Same shit. The output of a one-chip SNES is brighter, so that's got to affect the transition between the two, unless you do the mod. But that's one of it, and that is very easy to understand, even as a layman. But the thing that always confused me is, what about devices that automatically assume that because it's component video, the color is already compressed? Is that something that you guys have run into? And that leads into the FrameMeister question.
What do you mean by compressed?
So I've read, and keep in mind, I am like one hair above layman at this point, but I've read spec sheets on things trying to figure out why I see differences between component and RGB when they should be identical. And in most cases, it's because you have to reset the calibration between the two, because good equipment allows you to have individual settings for each. That's actually a good thing. But in reading these spreadsheets, a lot of these things list the component video input as 422.
I think what he's saying, Steve, and if you remember when you were over, we kind of looked at this on my television. My TV has a manual option between, was it RGB color space and YPbPr, and when you toggle between those, component looks really great on one, and it looks really, I think that's what he might be getting into.
That was on our HDMI port.
Yeah, that's part of it, but I was actually thinking of RGB monitors, where the input card spec sheet lists the RGB inputs as, I think it was 888 or something, whatever the full spectrum is, 24-bit or some crap like that. But as soon as you switch to component, it lists the input as YPbPr 422. So does that mean it's taking a 444 signal and compressing it immediately, or is that just what it's expecting, or is it processing that wrong? So is the Bob is Fat coming out different on the other side as a result of that, or is that just a random spec sheet?
I was talking about in terms of if there is no chroma subsampling, which you're kind of alluding to. I was just talking about forget it, because chroma subsampling kind of gets even more complicated.
Right.
I'm talking about if you have full bandwidth component and full bandwidth RGB, there are that transformation where Nick was like, okay, you can rotate this 30 degrees as long as you rotate it 30 degrees back, but the thing that's supposed to rotate it 30 degrees back is really rotating it 35 degrees back.
Right.
Right. So from a practical standpoint, there are multiple ways that you can transform RGB to YPbPr. There's not like one fixed way. Different standards use different coefficients to do it.
There's standard def, and then there's high def coefficients, and then there's ultra high def coefficients, and they're all different. And if you're doing upscaling, you have to be very careful what coefficients you use because of where you start and where you end up. That's one pitfall.
Yeah, so that could explain what happened. Do we lose connection here? Looks like we may have lost them.
Literally stopped. And that sucks because we were in the middle of a fucking awesome talk.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think the golden stream has died. Nick, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm back now. I think, and I started up the stream again.
Are we back, Nick?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
I can hear you. Let's wait till it goes live. Are we coming back? I think we're coming back.
We should be back.
We're going to come. We're back.
I think we had a hiccup there. Sorry,
Still,
so I dropped, and I
my
think
YouTube page is still turning there.
Put the battery and change the batteries out.
Yeah, we're back.
Use the black remote. Put the charge battery in the black remote. The white one is not prepared for this.
Oh, man.
Let's mute Zach.
Yeah,
Stop giving you a wife sheet.
All right, so what did I miss? Well,
So basically, I guess we got a little technical, and I was fucking loving it, but we missed our spot, and I'm not even drunk on wine yet. But I guess the practical explanation leading up to the FrameMeister talk, which I definitely want to get into.
Yeah, I want to get back to that too. Actually.
Is so when you have the proper transition between RGB and component, everything should be perfect. But have you guys witnessed scenarios both in RGB monitors and even like flat screen TVs and stuff where it's where you'll actually pump in? I guess use your cables as an example because I know the work that went into them. Have you seen a scenario where it's the signal is interpreted wrong based strictly the color space? So there's obviously the 240p thing, there's all that crap, but I mean I'm just talking about in the conversion from RGB to YPbPr 444 to 422.
I thought so the whole thing with 442, we're not talking about this at all. 422 is chroma subsampling, and it affects how fast your colors can change as you're moving across the screen. I don't think we even need to get into that at this point. I think it's a totally separate topic.
Yeah, so even if a device did that, and you didn't want it to, the resulting effects should not be to a degree where they're like noticeable to your average person sitting at a normal distance. You could zoom in like at the extremely fine pixel level and be able to see some things, but it's not at the level of like what you're seeing when you shove component into a FrameMeister and don't do any of the right tweaks.
Right, so that's exactly why I'm asking, is because the FrameMeister processes at 422.
Yeah, it cannot be related to chroma subsampling. It's just not, it doesn't make sense.
Right, like so something in 444 that's pure red, and you put it to 422, it should still be pure red because no color has changed. It's a solid color. But if you run it through something that rotates 35 degrees instead of 30 degrees, then it won't look quite red anymore.
Yeah.
It's two kind of different issues. The math to get back where you needed to go was wrong. And that's kind of what the FrameMeister. I'm suspecting, like I think Nick spent like a whole week trying to kind of like based on inputs and outputs
I was trying to determine what they were doing wrong. Like what was the wrong, like I assumed that we knew that it did a 30-degree rotation, let's say, and I was trying to figure out what was the incorrect rotation back that they did. And it was really challenging, and I was not successful with that. Maybe it's worth spinning that up again. But it takes a lot of time to try to back that stuff out.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just one last thing I wanted to mention, just from me, is that just because you pump RGB into something, like let's say out of the OSSC, you're getting RGB digital through your DVI port, and it's going into your TV. More likely than not, it is being converted at least one or two times to CBCR and back before the light comes out of your LCD pixels and hits your face. It's because the TV is doing all sorts of stuff in the meantime, either to meet some sort of electrical interface to pass the signal through from IC to IC, or to do some type of processing. It prefers to do it in the other space. The nice thing, though, when it's done internal to a single device, is it's more likely that their forward transformation is the exact, and the reverse transformation are the correct ones, right? So actually, anytime, and I've mentioned this before, I think, anytime you see a hue saturation adjustment, that can only be done in YPbPr space. So it has to go to that color space for you to do anything. That's why on PVMs, if you hook up RGB, they don't let you adjust hue and saturation. They only let you adjust R, G, and B levels. You can't do hue and saturation on RGB input because it's in a PVM, on those analog PVMs, the RGB input is going directly to the guns. It's not being converted. So you can't do a hue saturation adjustment. Does that make sense?
It does. All of this in general is still a bit confusing because each one of these things has so many different components involved in it.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not as easy as just saying, put a 470 ohm capacitor at the end of the cable and you're done. Like it's way more complicated than that.
Yeah, no, it's very difficult to visualize too. I tried to do it in like 2 dimensions because that's a lot easier to put on paper and our brains to think about. But in reality, this is in 3 dimensions, which makes you can do 2 degrees of rotations of your axis. You can stretch and scale things. You can do something called shearing. So there's more to linear transformations than I even got into. But so this stuff is kind of complicated. But at the end of the day, it turns out to be simplified into matrix math. So if you can understand linear algebra, you can understand a lot of a more simplified representation of it. Because
not even just matrix algebra, just regular algebra that most people are familiar with. If you multiply by 2 and you divide by 2 later, That's cancel out.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
That's in essence exactly.
That's the one-dimensional version. And then the two-dimensional version is what I showed, and then 3 dimensions is a little more complicated. And but yeah, at the end of the day, that's as long as you know what you did going forward, and there are caveats to that too. You can always undo it.
So yeah, Voultar. Sorry I interrupted you before, but
that's fine. No, it wasn't you, Steve. Bob was the one that kind of monopolized that. But anyways, what I was going to say is that while Steve was over here, we hooked up a PAL GameCube with the HD Retrovision component cables. We first did it into the FrameMeister, and the color was awful. I mean, what were supposed to be sort of gray gradients were very green. There were a bunch of color errors. And then when we hooked that thing up directly via component to my Vizio D series, it looked fucking amazing. Absolutely phenomenal picture. Even the decombing of the interlacing artifacts, while the like Castlevania Circle of Moon, when we were playing that didn't even bother me so much. The component looked unbelievably good. And the reason I bring up the FrameMeister in any respect is because I know a lot of channels. I know several people, not just one or two, but several people, when they do comparisons between, for example, RGB and component, they'll use the FrameMeister as sort of the intermediary device. And I guess the base question is it using the FrameMeister for that purpose kind of a dishonest showing of component output? That doesn't present a very fair comparison, because the way you quantify that with a FrameMeister, I mean, that's just not a very fair comparison, is it?
Only if everybody's using a FrameMeister, then it's the perfect comparison.
Correct, but I mean, there's several TVs in this house that I've compared the FrameMeister to, and then just to the TV scaling, its scaling engines, and the TV always destroys the FrameMeister in terms of color output when using components. So I just really think that maybe it's not just me, but the FrameMeister does a really shitty job unless you tune and dial the fuck out of it to get it to output anything somewhat decent.
And that makes sense to me, because the component inputs on consumer TVs, like I mentioned before, in the pro market, component video wasn't really standardized well, but in the consumer market it was. There is a CEA 770.2-D, which is what we use to meet specs with when we're designing the output of the component cables, and there's a dead spec for that. And so because all these consumer TVs use that, they're decoding it properly in terms of the reverse transformation. But Renee, did you want to say something? It looked like you wanted to say something earlier. And I want your opinion on stuff too, because you can't just sit there.
No, I was just having fun reading a troll post in the chat.
Well, it's like if you go back in time, I've fought this for years. People have asserted that the RGB output on PlayStation 2 is superior in whatever respects to the component output of the PS2. And the base device they're always using to kind of come up with this metric of comparison is a FrameMeister. And in my experience, the component from a PS2 looks just as good or just as brilliant as RGB. I think their testing methodology and the device they're using is the exception, and that's why everybody thinks you have to have RGB coming out of the PS2, otherwise it's just going to be visually inferior. That's just my opinion.
Well, Voultar, this is the case of the transformation being done to the signal, right? The graphics are being processed in RGB in some way or another, and the console transforms it into component, and the FrameMeister at some point or another needs to output HDMI, so it's going to transform it back into RGB, or the TV is going to transform it back, whatever, right? So those two transformations are happening in different devices, so they might not be equal. The rotation Nick was talking about earlier, right? They're not going to be the same. So I don't think it's a fair judgment to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah. If you have a FrameMeister as your intermediary device when you're trying to compare PS2 outputs, it's you're making a faulty comparison.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I've been thinking the same thing for a while. Like, I think probably for the last 2 years, I've been hearing this and never really put it together in my head that it was possibly FrameMeister related. But now I'm like starting to think that, kind of like Voultar said, that maybe this is just kind of not a real difference between the two, and just how people have been testing.
So
I
can we
fell
move
into
on
my
to
own trap of believing what I heard on the forums.
Yeah, there you go.
Best thing never to do.
Yep, happens to every one of us.
Yeah, I think now it's time to jump into what Zach, prematurely ejaculated before. Is what is up with the FrameMeister?
What, Bob? What the fuck?
I didn't make that noise. Renee did.
Wind down, Bob. Try to be civil this evening.
So how everybody's testing with the FrameMeister, like what, both between RGB and component and in general. Anybody?
I don't own a FrameMeister.
I mean, I've tested. I did. I don't know. It was a few months ago where I was testing out a theory I had about how TV's upsampled. Because one of the things that annoys me that I read all the time, like, it's great, especially if you join this group on Facebook. It's like the FrameMeister fan club on Facebook, which I joined because it's hilarious to read stuff on there. People just assert these things about televisions, which I don't believe that they have any real backing for. So, like, my favorite one is, oh, you should put your FrameMeister in 720 mode for a 4K TV. It's going to look better, or something to this effect, where people have decided that perfect integer scaling with your TV makes any difference at all. And I didn't believe any of it. So I did some testing a few months ago, just trying to understand how a TV looks with different upscaling ratios based on the input. And I used the FrameMeister and OSSC to achieve those different ratios. I have a 1080 TV and a 4K TV, and I used all the different things that you could upscale to in the FrameMeister, and then threw that at my TV and let the TV handle the rest. And I mean, just after 1 or 2 days of using the FrameMeister, I just realized that I was not getting a comparison that was really valid, just because of some of these issues. And actually, going back to the component versus RGB topic, which is how I was testing it, because those are the cables I have. I don't know 100% that it is just related to that transform being wrong. It could be something else in there too. It could be doing some other weird processing on component, right? It's not necessarily the transform. There could be some like incorrect thresholding of some levels. I don't know what's going on there, but
It could be saturating something.
right. That's what I mean when I say thresholding. Is it's like something saturating is just cutting off, and then when you try to undo transforms, it puts points in the wrong place. In any case, I just I moved purely to the OSSC for those comparisons, because that was the only way I could really understand what things were doing. So yeah, that's kind of my long answer to your question about the FrameMeister. So I know a lot of people use it and use it with our cables, and there are profiles out there by, I know this one guy, Chris, he goes by Implant Games. He posted some profiles that I look at his YouTube channel. Hey, that looks pretty good actually. So I think there are ways to get a reasonable picture out of FrameMeister plus component, but you have to make adjustments to account for something that's wrong there.
So Firebrand X just he wanted to really dive into this, and everybody who's ever seen his work knows his level of OCD. So I trust what he says, and he basically said that in I think he spent a day on it. As long as you set the levels correctly, so you would actually need different profiles. He said he found it to be identical. Now he didn't test every console, every game. Obviously, he's one dude, but and he hasn't tested your cables yet. I think he was basically just doing 240p and 480i out of a PS2 just to see, and he found that everything was identical if you changed the configuration values when you moved between RGB and component. So that was interesting because that explains a lot about why people might, use his profiles, flip over to component, and say it doesn't look right. So
makes sense.
Yep.
I just I love the FrameMeister because it just works on every TV, and you download Firebrain X's profiles, and every console's awesome. I hate that they still haven't upped support for more than 20 profiles at a time. That seems like a pretty easy thing to change in a firmware. And I hate the lag, and I hate that I could definitely, without a doubt, on even crappy TVs. And Nick, to your point, from 10 feet away, if you have two identical TVs and you split a signal between the OSSC in 5X mode and the FrameMeister in 5X mode, I could look at both and immediately tell you which is which.
Something that I don't understand why more people don't discuss, and maybe they're just not they don't have they're not they have the visual acumen, but the DAC noise off of the FrameMeister can be absolutely terrible across any system, across the board. It's like a lot of people want to talk about sort of the reflection, shimmering noise that you get in the one chip, and there are multiple methods of dealing with that. And my thing is 90% of what you see, as far as like the SNES one chips, is shimmering and sort of like that sort of ghosting effect. That's DAC noise on the FrameMeister. I could hook that sucker up to any other device, and 95.99% of that goes away. When Steve was here, we were trying to play a few different systems, and we were using Retrovision cables. And I'm telling you, it was just like I felt like I was in a nightclub, and freaking Renee just roofied my ass. Tracers and everything all over the screen. I'm like, God, you're not freaking Richard Simmons. Get away.
I remember when I first got the FrameMeister. This was like after I'd been using our cable prototypes for a long time. I plug it in and I'm like, is this how it's supposed to look? Like I was using RGB in a FrameMeister, but that thing was like in Mega Man X, the background of the highway stage was flickering. I'm like, and I asked Firebrand X, and I have this hooked up right? It's like, oh yeah, it does that. And I'm like, oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, it's got a host of problems.
One thing I should mention is, and I did mention this before, like you have the thing going in the TV, and the TV can convert between RGB and component however it wants to. I mean, I don't have the exact data sheet for the Marvell scaler in the FrameMeister, but I have a data sheet of a similar Marvell chip, which we use at my job. I have access to. That thing has its internal scaling engine runs at YPbPr. So people thinking they're going RGB into the FrameMeister and out RGB to HDMI, there's stuff going on in between, and the reason why you don't notice is because it's done inside and it's doing the correct transforms back and forth. It's not because you're never going to component, it's because the thing that's going to component knows how to go back to RGB out the end. So, I mean, I can't say 100% that the same Marvell scaler is does the same thing, but usually scaling engines do most of their processing in YPbPr space for efficiency reasons.
Well, it's a good bet. It's a good bet to make nonetheless, Steve.
Yeah, so it's just, I don't know, it's just a misunderstanding, I guess, of component and RGB. The whole thing with subsampling, I didn't really want to get into it because it kind of like muddies everything, but we could talk about that another time.
Yeah.
The whole thing.
Yeah, let's add that on the list for the next time because I really want to dig into that.
I just wanted to mention, I'm not trying to like be like, subsampling doesn't matter. I think I think it's important, but I don't think it's part of this conversation.
It's a topic in itself. Yeah.
Right.
Well, the bad thing about the OSSC, of course, is it's not compatible with every TV. But the good news is, it seems like a lot more TVs are able to be compatible with it, and I don't know why. I think it's because they've expanded the HDMI specs a little bit. But there was one dude on the forums, and I will verify this personally soon. But he found. TCL is the brand in the U.S. I don't know if they sell abroad, but I'm pretty sure it's the exact same thing, but branded something different. He found a 55-inch that, and this dude owns OLEDs. So this is not just some guy who bought a cheap TV who's flying the flag. And, of course, it's not going to perform like an OLED. But he said for the money, it was awesome. But this one model is only in 55-inch. But they have other models that are like 49, 50, and 65. I got friends that say they need a new TV and they're willing to buy it. So one of my friends is getting the 65-inch, another friend's getting the 50. I might get the 42. But they're cheap TVs that support all modes of the OSSC. And if these perform as well as the dude on the forum, he said he tested 1 frame of lag. And, it looked good. It didn't look great. It's not an OLED, but we're talking $360 for a 50-inch.
Do you know that every size of that TV supports the OSSC?
No, that's what we're testing.
Okay.
Because Voultar and I have argued about this before, and I am 100% positive that each size panel will act differently because it's completely different.
Well, it can. I never argued that it couldn't, Bob. You incorrectly measured the Vizio 40-inch D-Series 2016 model, so that's your own problem.
No,
so.
I correctly measured the 40-inch, and you bought the 50, right?
No, I bought the 58.
58, and they perform different.
Yeah, the more expensive models may have different processing in it. Usually there's probably some line you can draw where anything less than this is one style and anything more is a different processing chain. But it's worth testing all of them for sure.
Yes. Never draw that line, though.
Yeah, right. Test them. Yeah.
The innards could have changed, but arteens.com, that's what they initially benchmarked was the 40-inch, the D40DU 4K 2016 Vizio D series, and it ranked my testing, my results corroborated what they had. So, not saying there couldn't have been a change in manufacturing, but clear my opinion, the performance of my 58-inch panel was consistent with what their findings were.
Well, I definitely know for a fact because I've been out to the AUO plant in Taiwan. When you get runs of like 100,000 of something, the first 50,000 may or may not be the same as the second 50,000. Period. With the cheap stuff, if you get the really high end, even if it's different, part of the reason you spend so much money is because they make a lot of effort into making sure that people get the same thing. But with the cheap TVs. Dude, it's a $360 50-inch 4K TV that supports HDR. You're just lucky that you got that in the first place. So
yeah, it's actually kind of an interesting coincidence that Josh from Limited Run Games actually posted that he had just bought that TV as well and was blown away by how the HDR looked on it.
Oh, yeah, the same TCL thing?
Yeah, same TCL. I saw a tweet from him. I'm like, man, that's weird.
Yeah, it was Bon Yuki on the forums, who's got a couple of videos on YouTube about his OLED versus that, and it was great to hear that because you're talking about, somebody who has experience with like the best TV you could buy, or second best. I think he has the middle model versus this, and just to hear somebody say, yeah, it's a cheap TV and it doesn't hold up, but it's still not bad. So that was cool to hear like an honest opinion of something like that. So. I can't wait to try it. That might be for $360. That might be my new office test TV.
Cool. Well, I think should we move on to another topic then? We beat the color space to death for this time.
Yep.
This was a topic, just a kind of a lighter topic that Renee I think suggested, which was we should go around and list games that we spent a lot of time on as kids, and you're not allowed to pick commons like Sonic Mario, and Super Metroid.
Fuck you. Fuck
What if
yourself.
that's all we played?
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
I didn't play Super Metroid as a kid, so I'm fine.
That,
I will go first because I brought materials.
Oh God.
We can't see your materials.
Yeah,
I'll go get materials.
Sorry.
are you naked?
I have 3 games that I rented from Blockbuster regularly, even though beat them pretty much every single time I rented them. Like, I don't know why I didn't own them. I just was hard up for cash as a 10-year-old. But I love these games. This was one which is Captain America and the Avengers.
Oh, terrible game.
Yeah, absolutely awful. Beat 'em up. But still loved that. I was just really into Marvel comics at the time. The other one was Hyperstone Heist. I didn't get the Wonderful Turtles in time because I was a Genesis kid, but you know.
Well, Hyperstone Heist it was awesome.
And then the third,
I liked how when they made a completely different game on SNES and a different game on Genesis. I don't like it when it's the same.
yeah,
And just the audio sound kind of different. The graphics are a little different because of the different hardware.
like Aladdin. You like the Aladdin style difference between
Yeah,
games.
I like how I could play both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though the Genesis one is way better.
Well, the Genesis one is better.
And then
But
the third
technically-
one is, of course, Toe Jam and Earl. Rented this fucking game constantly. That's a game that I did not beat every single time, and even to this day, like, it's a crapshoot. When I fire that cartridge up, there's like a 25% chance I'm going to complete that ship.
But I mean, technically, when we're talking about Turtles in Time, right? The Genesis is the different game, and the SNES one is kind of the port of the arcade. So
Well, the SNES one had different things. Than the arcade.
it's a bit different. It's still a port. The Genesis one is clearly completely different, right?
But it's like a port.
The port
But
of
it's
the port.
based. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that though. I like how they're all different.
Yeah.
Seems almost like a stripped down version in a way. I don't know.
Well, as a kid, I remember I played Hyperstone Heist and Turtles in Time, and I was disappointed that the Genesis one you couldn't throw the foot soldiers in the screen, right? Only later to find out that the Genesis can't do scaling natively like the SNES can.
Okay. Yeah, like the arcade does, where you can. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's how you have to beat the Shredder, right? And the Technodrome. So,
Yep.
Whatever. Still good.
well, I think the music on the Genesis one was a lot better. I mean, but I'm a big FM synthesis guy, so.
Yep, I agree totally with
Yeah.
your body.
I guess I can go next. I mean, it was my topic, right? I only picked one game, but this is a game I spent a whole lot of time playing as a kid. Probably way too much time. It's Kirby's Avalanche. I really, really loved puzzle games as a kid, and this one just completely blew my mind. This was excellent. I mean, it also had... so Steve's not going to be happy because there's an almost identical game on Genesis called Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine.
which is Puyo Puyo.
Yeah, which is technically Puyo Puyo. You're right. Yeah, but I think Kirby's Avalanche is superior. And one of the only instances of games, in my opinion, where the music on SNES was actually better than the Genesis equivalent. But I spent a whole lot of time competing against my friends, playing this game, and I still play it to this day. I think it's the best puzzler that there is on SNES.
It's beautiful, Renee.
It is beautiful.
It's a beautiful memory. I'll go next.
Yeah.
You know, in the later years, probably I guess it was maybe even 1995, I decided that later in life I wanted a Sega Genesis. So I got one for Christmas with like a Sega 32X and I think a Sega CD. But what I remember the most about that, and it's one of the most memorable Christmases, is that Genesis was bundled with the Sega 6-pack. I don't know if you girls remember that, but it came with
I have that.
Sonic Columns, Revenge of Shinobi, Streets of Rage 1, Golden Axe, and Super Hang On. Those were like the best games at the time. I couldn't believe that all of this glory was in one cartridge. Streets of Rage and Golden Axe. I remember playing for months and months and months, and that was arguably the most memorable sort of time I had with video games. I don't know what it was. Something about Revenge of Shinobi. The game's fucking amazing.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the best games on Genesis.
Yeah.
The soundtrack, Yuji, what's his name, Renee?
Oh my god, it's escaping me because you quizzed me.
Yuji Naka, was that him?
No, Yuji Naka is the Genesis programmer for Sonic.
Right, yeah.
Yuzo something.
Yuzo Koshiro. There we go.
Oh, okay, so it's the guy who did the Streets of Rage.
He did Streets of Rage. He did Revenge
Yeah.
of Shinobi. Listen to those FM soundtracks and don't tell me that guy's not a genius.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
Streets of
there
Rage
was-
are some of my favorite, like, not just video game music, just any music. I love Streets of Rage soundtrack.
I listened to Streets of Rage 2 and 1 in my truck, and I feel it still sounds modern.
That guy, I think, was featured in the Digging in the Carts documentary.
Yeah, so if you have not watched that, highly recommend it. Just Google Digging in the Carts. It is a really cool documentary on video game music.
Cool. I'll check it out later in life.
Check it out.
That's all I have, though. You may go next, whoever else.
You're up, Steve.
All
Mr.
right. I guess, because Nick mentioned multiple, I guess I'll mention a couple, too. There's, for Super Nintendo, it was Final Fantasy II. I played all the time, and I didn't really own it. It was a game I just rented, like, every weekend. And I remember one weekend, I got sick. I stayed home from school on that Friday, and I went to the Farmore, which is, I guess, a Walmart type of store back in the day, and they had rentals, like cheap rentals, for 3 days. So if you rent on Friday, you got to return it Sunday. And I remember going there, getting a game, and then my brother came back from school. He's like, because like almost every weekend we rent like a new game, and he like, what'd you get? And I'm like, I got Final Fantasy 2. He's like, again, because I would get it every weekend. And I finally was able to start from the beginning on a Friday. And it was like, I was so focused. I had like this plan. I'd get back from school, start playing it, and then wake up at 7 a.m. Saturday morning, go through all of the Saturday. I finally like beat it like on Sunday, like at 5 p.m. right before I had to return it. And I played the shit out of that game, and I didn't like own it till like years later.
I would venture to bet that like everybody in the chat that's from the U.S. and had Blockbuster had the same experience of getting up early on the weekends to get in extra hours on the video games.
Yeah. I had to, because this was only 3 days, including the days you had to get,
Blockbuster didn't expand it to 5 days until later.
Yeah, I remember that. And then I guess the other game, which like I played a lot of GoldenEye. And not multiplayer GoldenEye, a lot of single-player GoldenEye. I got every cheat, and I would ask my friends, hey, you need your cheats unlocked? I'll do them all for you. And I'd get all the cheats for everybody, just do it, give it back to them, and then...
I might have needed you to get my the cheat from the second level. Yeah.
Dr. Noak has to be in the right spot. You just got to be patient.
Yeah.
The one for the second level is really hard. I remember spending weeks and weeks trying to get it.
I think it's 205 in the facility.
Secret agent
no, it's a 00 agent.
Okay, so you have to.
It's the hardest. It's at the hardest setting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's most of it is that's the guy needs to be in the right spot.
Yeah.
You can do everything else right, you're fine. So the one other memory with GoldenEye is I played so much GoldenEye that when EGM released the April Fool's thing, I didn't know at the time it was an April Fool's thing because I'm a dumb kid. I still am a dumb kid, but they're like, because on the back of the GoldenEye box, it showed all the different Bonds, like from throughout the timeline of Bond history, and there was Sean Connery and all these other ones, like on a photo of multiplayer, and so they use that to stage this thing where this is how you unlock all Bond mode, because in the cheat list there was one spot for a cheat missing, and they're like, this is how you get all Bond mode. You got to beat Aztec, which was the hardest goddamn level, on 007 where you set everybody's health to 200%, their accuracy to 200%, like all this stuff to 200%, you got to beat it in 9 minutes. And so I'm playing the shit out of this game, and I got really good at double headshotting people because they're 200% health. You got to hit them in the head twice. And I got so good, and I finally dominated that thing and got like under 9 minutes, and I got nothing. and the first thing that comes to my mind was maybe it was a typo. Maybe it was 8 minutes. And so I did it again and got even better, and I did it under 8 minutes, and I got nothing.
Good job, Steve.
But I got so good at the single player on that game. I was sniping people with the crappy PP7 in the head twice.
What about you, Bob? Did you play games as a child?
Yeah, it's such
lad?
a hard question to answer because all of my stories about like discovering the consoles. Because remember, I'm an old man at 36, right? So there was no internet, and you literally were a kid discovering these things. So the games that I discovered that I had no idea other people were even into are now just all the classics and stuff. So it's kind of hard to go back, but I mean, obviously, I know it's a popular one, but when Mortal Kombat came out, I was certainly, kind of apeshit over that one. But I think the one that stands out, which is still popular, obviously, but that's not one of the Mario, Zelda, Metroid, Sonics. I think I loved the movie Ghostbusters so much, and I remember wanting to love the NES game, and I remember plugging it in, and then you heard like the bad Ghostbusters soundtrack, and I played that so much trying to beat it, and when I went back and played it now, it's such a terrible fucking game. I hate it, but like I probably I probably clocked more hours in that than most humans should have. Way more on the good games, by the way. But if you're talking about a game that doesn't fall into the major categories, it would probably be that one. Because I loved all the big popular games. I really loved Super Metroid. Anything SNES in that genre. So Metroid, Zelda, Mario, and then all the Sonics and Mortal Kombat. All the popular ones, but. Ghostbusters was, I think, the non-popular one that I spent too much time on.
Sick bastard. Did you ever make it up the stairwell and defeat and juke and avoid the ghosts so you can get up and defeat Zool?
So I got to Gozer, not Zool. Zool is the dog. But I got there a bunch of times, but I never beat it until I got Game Genie. And then, then I had to just beat it with Game Genie. But no, I never beat the game, ever. So
it sounds to me like you wasted a lot of time.
Yes.
Okay.
As did I.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm almost your age, not as old as you. I played a lot of Mortal Kombat as well, but I almost exclusively played that at the arcade. So all my memories of Mortal Kombat are, about dishing quarters into a machine and beating everyone who's in line. I mean, I'm from a small town, so maybe there wasn't a lot of competition, but I remember not being beat that often at Mortal Kombat 2 as a kid, and that was a good feeling.
Sweet.
Yeah, beating Mortal Kombat for SNES was certainly a fun accomplishment. I think I remember calling my cousin Scott, who was just like, "You didn't beat it," and he knew I did. He was just fucking with me because he's all, that's what friends are for. So.
You didn't even get blood. Oh.
Yeah, doesn't count if you don't have the blood code. Fuck you.
Should we move on to some questions?
Yeah, let's take some questions.
Sure.
Alrighty. Here's a quick one that I can answer.
Why do you guys suck so much?
We've had multiple questions from people asking about how they could either super chat us or subscribe to us on Patreon or donate to us in any other ways. We're not doing that now. I don't know if we would ever do that in the future, but we definitely appreciate the thought. But it's not something that I would worry about. We just appreciate you showing up and sharing the podcast with people. But that was like at least 3 or 4 people were interested in doing something like that. So let's go to this one. I'm having some downtime soon, so I figured I'd try to learn some Double E basics. Just recommendations for online materials who'd like some self-paced training.
Well, Electro Boom's a great source for knowledge, right?
Yeah.
I already bought 3 of his shirts today. I fucking love that guy. I wanted to buy the unibrow one, but me myself if I didn't attack this shit every day, I would have an eyebrow that started here and ended here. Just one rectangle. Just one hateful stripe of awful. So when the first time I saw him do the thing with his eyebrows, I was like, "That's my boy right there."
That's amazing.
I mean,
if somebody's trying to learn something, I'd say what Steve said earlier about taking Spice or another kind of simulator like that and just fucking around and trying a whole bunch of different things. That's probably as good as reading a book or reading an article.
Well, I mean, there's 2 different, I think, ways. Like, do you want to just learn more and kind of get like better at like the hobbyist type thing, or you're trying to go full on, I want to be an electrical engineer and make stuff designed like super properly and all that stuff. So for the first, I guess, course, I think in both cases, actually, I think you need to you need to invest in this. This is Art of Electronics. It's expensive. This is the newest edition, but it has a lot of like, they just updated this like last year, so all the part numbers and everything, like you can still get them. I mean, this is a lot cheaper. The second edition for the international, not for resale in the States where the paper is super thin. But there's a lot of the same stuff, like at least the first few chapters with resistors, capacitors, diodes, transistors is the same. The only thing is like just go into your part bin and get your germanium diode. That they don't make those anymore. So that's the downside of getting the old version. But that Art of Electronics, and plus I was researching this a little bit. All About Circuits, I used to use quite a bit, and I looked recently. They kind of like updated their whole thing. All About Circuits has really quick tutorials on all the basics, and I think it's really good.
Middle of the sensor.
But then, if you want to go like more hardcore Double E stuff, there is. I just saw that Khan Academy has EE courses. Full-on EE courses. I watched a couple videos, like one on Fourier series and one on capacitor IV curves, and they have all that stuff for free. And another one I saw is called, that I used personally, is NESO Academy, NESO Academy. Really good for electronics, analog electronics. And my favorite is there's this Indian Institute of Technology. They have really good electronics video, like diodes, transistors, amplifiers. This guy is Professor Rao. I love his videos, but that's like really like high level stuff. There's a lot of good stuff online.
Yeah, there's also Coursera too, although you got to be... that website's gotten a lot worse now that they've gone kind of full pay model. Not that there's anything wrong with them trying to sustain the website, but it's hard to figure out how you can actually take the course for free still, which you can, but they just really push that specialization stuff on you. But there's all sorts of courses. I've taken a lot of courses on there, and kind of to add on to Steve's point there, if you really want to be able to like design things and be like a full-on
want to design things for sale and manufacturing,
I think
it's different.
Yeah, I think people really need to get their math skills up to the point where they can take a class as high as differential equations, because that stuff plays into circuit design on both digital and analog.
Another path I didn't really mention, a lot of you get a lot of people who are in software, like computer science, web development, and they want to tinker in with electronics. I think the best path for that is Arduino. Getting Arduino and doing Arduino projects is the best way to approach it from that angle, because you'll be able to tackle all that programming, and then now you're linking it into and when you're, instead of writing a variable to memory, you're writing a variable to electrical signal that goes to an LED or whatever, and you'll be able to start learning cool stuff pretty quickly. The best way to learn anything is to have a project you want to do, and you learn everything on the way to completing that goal. That's, in my experience,
the
best way to learn
me
something.
too. I have to do it to learn it. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to say, at the end of the day, you want your project to end up, on a breadboard or something like that you can see some results, that you can measure some results. Because as much as you're going to, write it on a piece of paper and calculate it, simulate it, write some code for it or whatever, if you light up an LED with an Arduino, you're going to be satisfied and you're going to feel like you accomplished something, right? And even though you might not have learned as much as another path, this is what you're going to retain. This is how you're going to learn. So,
I remember in school, there was the grad students, these Chinese grad students. They would ace all the homework, all the tests and everything, and then in lab time, I'm going around helping them all. Yeah. Because they're unable to do that part of it. So you really need to have that practical.
That is every profession, though. I mean, I grew up doing IT stuff, and I remember getting to my first real job, and they said, "Well, we're hiring a new assistant network administrator," and I was a little annoyed by that. Which, I was a kid, so of course they're not going to fucking hire me to do that. But still, I was a shitty kid. It's like, well, I'm 22. Why wouldn't you do me? But the guy that they said, they were like, well, he's got these degrees, and they list, all these certifications of bachelor's, and for the first month and a half, I had to train him on to do everything. Me, just the annoying kid who liked to drink beer and fix computer shit, had to train the fucking guy that they hired to, be my boss, and because I jump in and do it, and he was great at memorizing stuff, but had no idea what to do it, and that's every profession. And think about that the next time you go to the doctors. Bunch of people just really good at memorizing shit, poking around at your body.
I think it really comes down to if there's a certain skill set that you're wanting to achieve, or there's skills that you're wanting to acquire. I don't think it's in my opinion, the most success I've ever had in terms of effectiveness of learning something is having a big goal. And then learning things in very small baby steps. Let's say I wanted to create, like in software, like a Joust arcade game clone or something like that. You know what I mean? That's a pretty daunting task to somebody that doesn't have any programming experience. But if you first learn how to maybe put hardware sprites on the screen, and then maybe you learn how to check for collisions in registers for those two sprites. And then maybe you learn how to draw the background and make collision boxes there and everything like that. It's spend a couple of months just learning, just focusing on very small little pieces. And then after 2 or 3 or 4 months, you can put it all together. Not only can you put it all together to make that kind of a game, you can apply that to all sorts of other disciplines that rely on similar technology. That's how I've learned everything I've learned, is just focusing on the little minuscule details. And then after time passes, just putting it all together in life.
Yeah, that's a classic engineering technique too. Is just breaking everything down into sub problems. That's just a valuable skill to have for anything you'll do. Is never approach anything as a big problem that needs to be solved.
Right. That's right, Nick.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. If anybody ever told me when I started writing my Google Doc on how to RGB mod a SNES that it would turn into a website with 200 pages, I'd be like, fuck that, I'm going to go get drunk. But small goals, baby steps.
All right, let's lightning round a couple here, because my computer's starting to make this really loud beep at the motherboard, and I'm pretty sure it's going to light on fire for some reason. So I don't know what's going on.
There's probably a 5-volt chip on there on a 3.3 volt bus.
Yeah, probably.
Well, then it will explode into a mushroom cloud, not just right.
So here's a question: why aren't Extron's switches recommended for HD Retrovision cables? I think that person had a misunderstanding. It's not that we don't recommend them; it's that we haven't tested them, so we can't officially recommend them as working. But I'm sure they're fine. Plenty of people use them and like them. There was speculation a while ago about whether a Game Shark-like protection might be available for a 3.3 volt multi-carts. How likely is that something would be made available? I have no idea. Renee, you know anything about that?
Well, okay, I'm kind of being put on the spot here, but I guess if you could monitor, the read-write signals of the various consoles, you could, I guess, in theory, do the proper level translation between the two.
So it sounds like it's speculation that it's possible, and that the likelihood that it's going to be made available to consumers is about 0.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're doing that, you're introducing a few nanoseconds worth of propagational delay in the signal, and I assume it would be okay to do that, but you'd need to test it, right? Because a lot of those devices has FPGAs, and they could be in the 8 or 9 nanosecond range. And some of those, for example, on the Sega Genesis, they have DMA units running. I don't know how close to the timing requirements the DMA is with the SD RAMs on there, so could be introducing a lot of problems by adding a few nanoseconds worth of propagational delay. So. In theory, it would be as simple as adding level translators. In practice, you need to test the timing.
Right on. All right, here's a double question. I'll answer the first one, which is, do you guys hold this regularly? Yeah, we're going to start doing this twice a month, I think. And the second part, which I'll let Zach answer. Any interest
most
in...
of us hold it more regularly than twice a month, Vic. Why don't you rephrase that?
What's that?
The question?
I think most of us hold it more regularly than twice a month. Why don't you rephrase it?
Do we hold this podcast regularly? We will be holding this podcast twice a month. The next one in 2 weeks. We will be holding it if you guys keep watching. If we hold 2 a month and it drops down to 3 viewers, I love you 3 guys that do it, but we, or
trying to fill what people want.
I want to hold Voultars as twice a month at least.
If we become really uninteresting and have nothing to talk about that frequently, then we'll cut it back. But I think we'll be okay.
Where have you been? That's all this is.
Are you guys interested in having more participants? Anyone?
Well, we need to figure that out, I think.
For now, no.
Excellent. Okay.
I think the answer is just, without any explanation, no. Yeah. Not at the moment.
I mean...
Not at the moment is a polite way to put it.
I did ask Adam Korlick to come on this week, but he was not available for tonight. Maybe 2 weeks, he said.
He tried moving some things around the schedule. It didn't really work out.
It was my understanding he was holding a beard combing seminar in the Alps.
How is it possible to use a Y-splitter with HD Retrovision cables without degradation, but not with other YPbPr cables?
That is a good fucking question.
Steve?
Yeah, Steve, we're all looking at you, dude.
Yeah, STD, let's go.
It's because Steve is prettier than everybody else. That's why.
Because I made it so with my blessing. That's the reason. So it kind of it's kind of related to Renee's thing with the diodes conducting on devices. So you have, let's say you have a Wii and a PS2 component and a TV, and all of them are linked together, right, through a Y splitter. And let's say your Wii is on, but your PS2 is off. You want that entire Wii signal to go into the TV. But in practice, there's protection in the PS2 these protection diodes, and some of that signal is going to leak into the PS2, the console that is off, because it's going to run through these protection diodes. And so you're going to get some output. The first time I've noticed this is a long time ago, where Pelican made a S-video cable that had a PS2, a Dreamcast, and a N64 thing. And when you have them like all plugged in at the same time, I remember noticing like this thing is off, but I was like unplugging it, and like the screen would get brighter and darker. It's because it's leaking into the console that's off. And so because our circuitry that's driving video is not in the console, it's in this thing that we made. I'm able to control that. I actually blocked the leakage path, so nothing will leak into our cable, but it has to be our cable, because our cable's output voltage is DC coupled from 0 up. If you have an AC coupled signal, it could leak into our cable. If you have our cable, it will leak into like a PS2 or Wii. But if you have two HD Retrovision cables, they won't interfere with each other.
Well done, sir.
Cool.
Great job.
Does that make sense?
I keep being told in the chat that my volume is really low. I have it like cranked all the way, so
I hear you thoroughly well.
yeah, sorry, chat. All right.
Tell them to put the subtitles on.
I don't even know. This question's weird. What's your opinion on SNES component mods? Something blah, blah, blah. It seems potentially to give an output that can rival the one chips while being available from a wider range of early SNES revisions. I don't know what mod they're referring to. I don't know if anyone does.
I do. Zach, do you know?
He's referring to, this was very popular a couple of years ago. People were harvesting the encoders off of earlier SNES revisions that had a pseudo component thing, and people were sort of taking advantage of that and making component mods possible with this particular SNES encoder that had YPbPr outputs on the analog outputs.
I think I remember this. The chip, the encoder chip, had B-Y and R-Y raw coming out of it, and it's meant to pass through external LC filters to do the 1.3 megahertz cutoff before it gets modulated into S-video back inside the chip. It's meant to run outside the chip just to go through external filters, because you can't put these big inductors inside the IC and then loop back into the chip.
That's right.
And I think the problem is, one, you can't really drive that directly out, and two, it's R-Y and B-Y without any scaling, and I don't think anybody did any measurements on what those levels are to be able to even generate a true PB and PR signal out of that.
No one has posted scope captures. Maybe they've done them, but no one's posted them.
Right. Yeah. I guess nobody's posted that.
Yeah, could I just chime in from a layman's point of view? What both of these dudes said is true, but from just a layman's like third party looking in, all the people that say, "Oh yeah, it's just as good as a one chip," are completely full of shit. I've seen what they look like, and it looks better. It looks better than composite. There's no doubt in my mind. But when you put them next to a properly attenuated one chip with, you get the Voultar board, you put that out to a good display, and then you take the component modded chip from the original one, you could see the difference immediately. Just switch between inputs and it's good, but it's not the best. So
I'm also skeptical that this mod, unless it was properly vetted with the measurements I'm talking about, I'm skeptical this mod would look better than plugging in the component cables, because the RGB smearing that's occurring in these happens at a stage way before any of this.
Right.
So I don't see how it would undo this one chip this blurring that's not being done by the one chips type stuff.
Yeah, it's either from the PPU or it's something in the PPU. The weird slew rates. There's a lot of funny things with the analog RGB output of the two PPU SNESs. That's something I want to get back onto and masturbate on to see if I can't find an analog solution for that. But ultimately, changing the encoded format after that's all done, that's really not doing anything to alleviate the fuzziness. And really what this comes to, this is really likened to, in my opinion, when the S-Video mod became so popular with the Genesis. And most Genesis at the time used a CXA1145 encoder. Well, they saw that there were chroma inputs and luma inputs, as well as luma outputs and chroma outputs on this 1145. Well, that was never designed necessarily to drive S-Video. It's sort of the same principle with the encoder on the Super Nintendo. That was used to loop the shit in and take it through some components and pipe it back in, pull it out and into the encoder, so you could drive encoded composite properly out of that encoder. But people took advantage of that, and people used that 1145, those outputs, to drive a pseudo S-Video. And it kind of works, but it's not the intended use of that, in my opinion. Look at the data sheet, motherfucker. Look at the data sheet.
Well, if all goes well, I should be able to afford my brand new scope next month, and then I'll be flying out to Chicago so Steve can teach me how to use it. But, I would actually love to do a side-by-side comparison of an original SNES with the published component mod versus like a Voultar modded mini with the Retrovision cables, and do a side-by-side comparison. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be black and white difference. But then I would also love to test the actual RGB or the YPbPr lines and see if they're even voltage correct at that point. So
I'd also like to see the component mod versus just plugging in the Retrovision cables up the back, like before, without any mod on the two two PPU.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you mean so from the same console? Yeah, I'm sorry. That as well. All of those, all three of those. So yeah. Cool.
Let's we're at 2 hours. Should we cut it there and just have the people in the chat just, because I know there's probably a ton of questions that we have not caught from people in the chat, but maybe we just ask them to post it as comments and take them next time, or
maybe we could take 10 minutes.
We all should, before we leave, we keep forgetting to do this. We need to tell everybody where we're going to be next, because we're always doing things. But before we do that, I did see a question that I love questions like this. So Michael asked, he was being a little bit sarcastic, so thanks, Michael. Always enjoying the entertainment. But what's the difference between hardware simulation and emulation? And I do like questions like this, because while he was being a little bit sarcastic, it's a very good question, because My Life in Gaming in their videos, so they did the right thing. They said, we're not experts, so we're going to just give a basic, a basic understanding of this. Whereas, you download like Hygen, and that's a software emulator, but you run FPGAs, and that's a hardware simulation. And it's basically just words people made up so we could differentiate between the two. So it's a good question, because a lot of these things are actually, they turn into misconceptions. Because the guys from My Life in Gaming, they always have the best intentions. I love both of those dudes, but sometimes they forget that they have like hundreds of thousands of views on every video. So it's like, or in all their videos. So yeah, that's just a term they made up to differentiate between the two and using their examples. That's not a good thing. But I'm glad you asked, because I get that question all the time from people that watch their videos who have no previous knowledge of this stuff. So
and I want to add my 2 cents to that is FPGA simulation, because that's the word they use, is not inherently better than an emulator running on a Raspberry Pi on a PC, right? Because both source codes for those might be based on the same emulator, might be based on the same erroneous documentation. So it's not inherently better if you're running a game on an FPGA versus running a game in software, right? It doesn't make it perfect and an exact replica of the SNES, right? If your SNES is running in an FPGA, people need to understand that because it's in an FPGA, it doesn't mean it's better. No, because maybe the guy writing the code in VHDL or Verilog or whatever based his design off of open source emulator code that he found on MAME or whatever, right? So they could all be integrating the same kind of mistakes.
Yeah, I think what people are interpreting as FPGA is better is the fact that you don't have to deal with timings in the same way you have to deal with when you're doing software emulation. But that doesn't mean you have something that's even doing timings well.
It doesn't mean it's better in any way, right?
Yeah.
When you guys said hardware simulation, I was just thinking Spice. I was super confused. Hardware simulation, like I'm simulating my hardware when I'm making my hardwares.
There you go.
But yeah, let's please, if you had comments we didn't answer, please post them into the comment section under this video. We will get to them next time. I think because we're doing this in 2 weeks, we can maybe do a show more focused on user comments as opposed to our own topics, and maybe alternate back and forth every other week or every other show like that. So yeah, please post them.
Can you post them like as a reply to your thing? Like some people reply to your thing that says.
Yeah, I'll always post a comment at the top. And
no, Steve, in YouTube there are things below called comments that people could type into on the video.
Yeah, I mean, put it anywhere you want, just as long as I can find it in the video.
I just think it's easier if it's put into that first thing.
I know.
First, what is it called? Comment?
Yes.
Memento, whatever.
Just get it there. We'll add it to our list, and we'll try to answer it next time. Or
yeah, and if there's any suggestions on what you guys want to see from us, I don't want to steal Voultar's catchphrase, but we're out to service your bodies. So
yeah,
whatever. That's not his catchphrase anymore.
I know.
Better.
Yeah,
it's that simple.
That's a good point. They don't have to be a question. You can also suggest like topics for our long form chats, and we'll consider those as well. So yeah. Let's call it there so I can shut off this computer before it explodes and start researching motherboard beep codes.
All right, and if anybody's around, I will be at the Long Island Retro Gaming Expo. I'm pretty sure on Saturday for most of the day. Then Saturday night I'll be in Jersey watching one of my favorite fucking bands at Mexicali Live. Mike Z lives in the neighborhood. Maybe he'll come by. I might be back at the Retro Gaming Expo on Sunday. It depends on how good it is. I've never been there. I heard it was pretty cool, though. Anybody else? Anybody else going to be anywhere in any place?
The next convention I'll be at is MagFest. So
the sold-out MagFest.
It's not sold out yet, but the cheap tickets are sold out. It was a bit of a fiasco. Yeah, I'm not going to any conventions the rest of this year.
I live near the North Pole, so I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, and Zach lives in the middle of nowhere, so he's not going to anything either.
I live in the mountains.
But you should come out here and go to MagFest with us.
Where's that at? Where's that at?
DC.
Oh yeah. Well, again, I'm kind of banned from any sort of governmental territory, so.
We already heard about the moose poutine incident in Canada, so let's not try that out anymore.
Motherfucker, I told you 1,000 times. The reason I'm banned from Canada is because Alex Jones and I. It doesn't matter.
There we go.
Just we'll leave it at that, and we'll call that for this time, and we'll see you all in 2 weeks, and same time.
Yep.